Bangkok is a fortified capital. At its center lies Ratana Gosin, an island formed by a bend in the Chao Phraya and an excavated canal completing the defensive ring. The walls were raised after the fall of Ayutthaya in 1767. Bastions face the river. Guns command the approaches. Within those walls stands the Grand Palace. Within the palace, the king. But this is not what George Windsor Earl sees first. He arrives about an hour before daybreak. The first sign of the capital is not masonry, it is sound. Vast numbers of Chinese blacksmiths busily employed forging ironwork. Before sunrise, the city is awake. These ironworkers were not merely local craftsmen. Bangkok had become an active node in regional ship repair and construction, supplying fittings for junks trading to Canton, vessels operating through the straits, and rivercraft linking Siam to India and the Malay world. They passed through junks, boats, and floating houses, jumbled together in glorious confusion, so dense they totally conceal the banks from our view. He notes that the river presents one continued scene of bustle and animation. Canoes, not larger than clothes baskets, slip between vessels. Talapoins collect rice. Women open shutters and expose printed calicos, paper umbrellas, sweetmeats, fruits, pots, pans. Trade, he writes, is carried on entirely by the women. The city appears informal. It is not. Chinese labor binds the port to Canton. Malay and Arab traders pass as they have for centuries. Indian cotton hangs in the markets. Bangkok floats at the center of regional systems, but it remains sovereign. Opposite the foreign factory, the congestion thins. They at last got a sight of terra firma, because the river before it is very clear of floating houses. He describes the factory as standing somewhat apart from the crowded dwellings upon the river, an enclave permitted, not integrated. Foreign factories in Asia were rarely neutral ground. They were negotiated spaces, defined by treaty privilege and revocable tolerance rather than sovereign right. English merchants were not new to Siam. Since the 17th century, the English East India Company had attempted intermittent trade, often frustrated by court politics and competition with the Dutch. Portuguese influence dated back even earlier, woven into court ceremony and Eurasian communities. The Dutch had once secured firmer commercial footing in Ayutthaya, while French influence had surged under King Narai before collapsing. By the 1830s, British power in the region had strengthened through Singapore and Penang, but Siam had granted no sweeping commercial monopoly to any single European state. The American mission arrived differently, under direct state authority rather than chartered company privilege, seeking treaty access without territorial claim. This difference mattered. Siamese policy in this period was deliberate. The court received British merchants, American envoys, and other foreign representatives without binding itself too tightly to any one power. By allowing limited access while withholding permanent advantage, Siam positioned foreign interests against one another. British commercial pressure from the Straits, French ambitions in Indochina, and American treaty diplomacy were all observed carefully. Concession to one could be balanced by engagement with another. This calibrated diplomacy would become one of the kingdom's principal strategies for avoiding the fate that overtook much of Southeast Asia in the 19th century. Hattie descends from the house carrying something like a child's coffin. It is a canoe, 5 feet long, 1.5 feet broad. I certainly expected to see the boat slip from under him. It does not. Hattie glides away, the sides not more than 2 inches out of the water. Earl calls it a mere skimming dish. Balance here is practiced. Inside the factory, the tone changes. After resting, Earl joins breakfast. Present, Edmund Roberts, Robert Hunter, Mr. Morrison, officers of the USS Peacock. The table is abundantly provided. Outside, trade flows by habit. Inside, diplomacy begins by protocol. Behind the river markets rises the defensive ring, moat, wall, bastion. Earl remarks upon the walls and batteries which command the river. The Palace Island sits within waterworks designed for both ritual and defense. Guns rest upon open platforms above parapets, positioned to sweep the bend of the stream. The fortifications visible in Earl's day were the product of successive adaptations. After the fall of Ayutthaya in 1767, King Taksin established his capital at Thon Buri on the west bank, fortifying the riverfront against renewed Burmese assault. When Rama I shifted the court across to the east bank in 1782, the new capital at Ratanagosin was deliberately enclosed within an artificial canal and wall system, replicating and refining Ayutthaya's defensive model. Over the following decades, bastions were reinforced, additional batteries were positioned along the river bend, and the moat network deepened, forming a layered defensive landscape that combined hydraulic engineering with artillery placement. These fortifications were not decorative survivals from Ayutthaya. They were deliberate responses to a century of Burmese invasion and to the expanding presence of European naval power in Southeast Asian waters. Elsewhere in Asia, corporations rule territory. In India, the East India Company commands armies. In Java, Dutch monopolies hardened into sovereignty. Bangkok remains different. Foreign ships may anchor, foreign envoys may request audience, but the center remains enclosed. Authority here is architectural.